I called a meeting to order at 5:03. And let me just, if you would acknowledge we're recording this, right, Lauren?
Yes.
Okay, if you could just say that you're here for the recording when I ask your name. Tim Davis here. Matt Marr
here.
Susan Bryant
Here.
Lisa Hewitt
Here.
Tom Norton
Here.
Paula Curran. I see you. I see your house.
I think she stepped away.
Well,
have to give her a sec.
there you go. Paula Curran, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Good. Okay. And is anybody else on the line that we don't know about that I haven't mentioned?
We just have an audience member, Peter Pescatori.
Okay.
Hi, Peter.
I know there were a number of people that said they were going to join as an audience, but we have a quorum, and so I'll call the meeting to order. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Lauren Lynn, the town planner, who has sent out the PowerPoint, which she will share with everyone and go through it, and we'll see where we go. Thanks,
All right.
Lauren.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I think everyone here knows who I am, but just for the recording's sake, my name is Lauren Lind. I'm the town planner for Cohasset. I'm going to share my screen so that we can all look at the same thing at the same time. And this is the same presentation I sent to you. I just updated the date to reflect that it's now November 5th instead of October. So again, I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight and taking your time. The exercise I'm trying to reflect back to you tonight is really taking all of the comments I received from all of you in the past few weeks. From our last meeting, we spoke about sort of where we go with implementation of the harbor plan. I know Tim had broken out some opportunities, thoughts on subgroups or working groups, which is something that we've done at the master plan level with the master plan implementation committee. And I thought it would be best to have all of us sort of brainstorm. I wanted to hear individually from the members and their thoughts and priorities. You know, I know it was a little confusing at first. Some folks were a little, what exactly do you want me to give to you? And I really wanted it to be open-ended because I didn't want to tell folks how to think. I wanted to hear from your own perspective. So with that, you know, what are we talking about tonight? The following things are really just my attempt at consolidating and presenting back sort of the main themes that I heard to give an opportunity to suggest sort of next steps, immediate next steps as we work through this. And it's really just intended to provide all of you with food for thought so we can have a larger discussion about where we might go. There's been no decisions made. I've run this past a couple of people internally at town staff, just the ideas that I have, but there's nothing written in stone here. So you can take it or leave it. With that, I'll begin talking about sort of the priorities and themes that I saw. And again, this has been talked about for a long time. You have the priorities that were discussed and organized that went into the harbor plan. None of this is new. Some of these you might see just different terms because again, this is how I'm sort of reflecting back at you. I think something that was really clearly evident and has been evident all along is that in sort of the number one priority for everybody is the commercial fishing fleet. It's heavily tied to infrastructure and funding and how we might go about these improvements that are in the plan. With that, another bucket I organized is the infrastructure. You know, there's all this talk about different projects, dredging, seawalls, the breakwater. There's a lot of mention about a mooring study. I know harbor security is something that's been a concern and that's been looked at and being worked on, but not quite complete with that yet. There's a lot of land and waterside infrastructure that the harbor plan details. There's also a lot of funding questions, sort of, you know, do we do an enterprise fund? Do we seek grant opportunities for funding? Do we do fundraising? Do we form a nonprofit? There's all these sorts of questions out there. Another main category is public access. And, you know, I look at this in terms of public access in a number of ways, in terms of long-term planning and design, physical access to the shoreline and increasing public access along the harbor walk, things like that. How we might tie the Captain's Walk into the Elm Street Corridor Initiative, which is something that's being carried out right now and looked at more closely under the master plan umbrella. And another thing that a lot of people mentioned was, you know, moving forward, how do we improve or sort of, you know, drill down upon the Scituate and Cohasset relation, particularly in how, you know, Bass and Beach ties in. Another bucket was harbor sustainability. And I look at this more as a socioeconomic. There's a lot of things that go into long-term sustainability, which I look at as economic vitality, sort of the land use component, and zoning review, and then also environmental issues. We talk about, there's a lot of initiatives happening right now. For example, also under master plan is the economic revitalization sort of task force. They're looking at this as a whole. I think that there are opportunities to sort of tie this in and drill a little bit more down to the harbor, but also make sure that we're not doing things in silos, and we might be able to coordinate with that in the future. And then lastly, the other sort of bucket is citizen engagement. I think there's opportunities here, like setting a regular meeting schedule for our committee, the harbor-related committees, increasing transparency, really taking advantage of sort of administrative assistance through the town, and utilizing existing communications resources. And by that, I mean, perhaps it's using, the town manager's weekly update, or using that we have a new sort of PR campaign that we can use. We were just speaking earlier before we started the meeting about what we did about examples of how to vote, short little snippets. There's things like this that we do in town that we can take advantage of from the Harbor Committee. If there's a certain initiative that we want to really sort of broadcast or get public feedback, we can take advantage of those things to gain more public input. So with those sort of categories organized with that, I really started to think, what actionable items can we do immediately next that might help us? And I came up with 3 next steps that I thought might be helpful. Number 1 is really setting a regular standing meeting, but that might be reduced frequency for the full Harbor Committee. And the reason I say this is that I don't know what the future of the Harbor Committee is. That's one of the questions that I think needs to be discussed is, what's the composition? What is the charge? But right now, I wouldn't suggest that we take away the Harbor Committee. I think no matter what sort of working groups we focus on, I think there's merit and value in having one place where all of the different stakeholders can come together and share information and touch base with each other. So I'm not suggesting that we eliminate that, but I think if we are planning to focus into more getting into working groups and drilling down on other tasks, I think we should sort of reduce the frequency. Maybe it's every other month or quarterly for the full Harbor Committee to meet, and that way it's predictable and it's, people have it in their schedule well ahead of time. My second suggestion is establishment of 2 subcommittees, really sort of almost breaking the Harbor Committee as it is in 2 to focus on different initiatives. That would also set regular meeting schedules, again, because we want to be transparent, and all of these subcommittee meetings, working groups, anything is open meeting law regulated. So everything's open to the public, nothing's going on behind closed doors. But if we could set regular meeting schedules, again, I think it goes a long way for people feeling that they can participate. And in addition, I'll get more into the detail on those in a minute. But the third thing I would suggest is to plan for a joint meeting with the Master Plan Implementation Committee and the Harbor Committee, so we can sort of talk this out, how we might determine opportunities to coordinate or piggyback what existing initiatives there are. So with that, I taking a look at the scale that Tim had prepared for us last summer, looking at the flow chart of how these might be organized. I took a look to say that under the Harbor Committee, this sort of umbrella would be 2 different subcommittees. One would be the Harbor Infrastructure Planning Committee, and one would be the Harbor Governance Committee, which does already exist, but my thought process is that we might just retweak that a bit. So first, I'll talk about the Harbor Infrastructure Planning Committee, which is a concept that I thought of. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, the support for commercial fishing and infrastructure is a huge priority. Everyone underscored that in all of the different comments I've received from the members. I think that what we see right now is that we have our harbor plan. We thought a lot about it. There's an implementation chapter there that gives great opportunities and suggestions on how to move forward, how to, different grant opportunities that coordinate with other initiatives that you could group together. But I think at the end of the day, there's still so many things on the plate that I don't think that we have the bandwidth and time to address that in our regular Harbor Committee meetings. So the reason I am suggesting breaking this way is that I think knowing that the capital fishing and infrastructure is going to take a lot of planning in terms of scheduling and timelines and securing funding. I think it takes some real capital planning and engineering expertise. And I think that we can chunk that portion out and have that as a standalone committee. There's a long list of things that are identified and that will take a lot of planning and expertise to go into that. And if we could chunk that out and have that sort of go in its own track, and then the next committee that I'll get into more would be sort of harbor governance reimagined, as I'm stating. Again, I think that with the governance committee is sort of functioning like, how does the harbor committee function? What do, and I think that there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered. And even, I mentioned to Tim in preparing for this meeting that I don't pretend to know and to give you all the answers. I don't have, there's a lot of things here that are, beyond a staff member, beyond even the harbor committee that need to be discussed, perhaps at the select board level or with different, groups in town. But I think that as we look to sort of redefine potentially the scope and function of the existing harbor committee, that's a conversation that still needs to take place, and that could happen here in this committee. This committee could continue to talk out additional prioritization and goals, and how they might, coordinate again with the master plan. I'm sorry, did someone have a question?
Oh, well, thank you. Can I call you back? I had to jump onto a harbor committee meeting in my town. I'm on the harbor.
I just muted Tom. Anyway, so examples for coordination opportunities with existing select board and master plan committees are, as I mentioned, the economic, task force. Is it maybe there's a potential to add a harbor committee seat or a harbor committee liaison to make sure that those efforts are dovetailing with what needs to be reflected in the harbor plan. Again, opportunities to coordinate with the Elm Street Corridor Initiative as we plan a schedule for the next 2 to 3 years, looking at construction and grant funding and sort of placemaking along this corridor. We can collaborate with the Captain's Walk. I mean, they really shouldn't happen in silos. They should be a coordinated effort. So things like this that I think that, again, the harbor committee doesn't need to do all of this implementation. I think there's partners in town that can be identified, but again, this is a long way away, and a lot of these things we need to prioritize, and that's going to take a lot more talking. But in the meantime, I think if we separate it this way, we can continue to have these important conversations and connect with the other groups in town that might be able to help with this implementation. But at least we have another committee where we can have the capital planning for the commercial fishermen support and lobstermen support that we need happening at the same time. So again, further questions that the harbor committee might consider. However we move forward, what is the role of the existing harbor committee? How do we want to meet and shape this? One of the things that was brought up in the harbor plan is there an opportunity to merge the Government Island Advisory Committee with the harbor committee? Perhaps is this a reimagined governance committee? I leave that for you to, how do we plug into existing resources and initiatives to avoid duplication of effort? And again, just what are our desired committee schedules? And this is all food for thought. I look for you to, really figure this out with me. And then finally, future areas of concentration that might be, maybe we have another subcommittee that chunks off and works on these items, but sort of land use and zoning. Something that's been brought to a lot of our attention is that in a very small geographical area that is the harbor, there's a lot of zoning districts. Actually, there's several, is that the most efficient way? Do we want to reimagine that? We can start to have those conversations. Another big one's Cohasset-Situate relations in terms of we've heard aquaculture, this Basking Beach, there's a lot of different areas that tie in together. Environmental issues and coastal resiliency, information on public access, which again I sort of think about physical and conceptual. What can we do to improve physical access to the waterfront, but also what can we do conceptually to allow more transparency so that any regular citizen in Cohasset knows what's happening in the harbor and knows what's going on in the harbor committee, whether it's doing more information using sort of the communications products that we have. And then finally, economic development and business support. I think that particularly in the changing times that we're in right now, as we look at economic development, there's a lot of uncertainty. And I think this is really going to be something that we learn a lot in the coming months. As I mentioned, the economic task force is looking at this right now, and I believe putting together what will be a future economic development committee for the town. So, how might the harbor concepts that relate to these topics fit into that picture? And I think that's something that we need to plan for in the future. And with that, that's the end of my thought process for you. I just want to thank you all again for your time and for listening to me. If it wasn't helpful, then that's just my 2 cents, and it was a thought exercise. But I do think that there's some points here that might help us move. I feel like we were hitting a little bit of a roadblock, and this is just, I'm trying to give you a different perspective on how we might move forward. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'll turn it back to you for conversation. And I see now that my screen's not shared, we have a couple more members that are here, so I'll promote them. Lori is on the phone. We have Barbara here. Okay.
Alana, thank you so much for doing all that work. We really appreciate it. I think it helps. I don't know if you wanted to comment at all on I mean, I certainly wanted the top priority to be the commercial fishermen, and I'm wondering how that came through in all the submittals.
It was everybody's top priority.
So how do we start? How do we start with that top priority? I mean, at what point, where do we begin to put shovels into the ground, so to speak? Does it have to dovetail into the town master plan, or could it go separately from the master plan, or is it part of the master plan?
So I would suggest that my reaction is that I think this could be accomplished in a more expeditious way by creating this subcommittee that focuses on that topic. I know a lot of, there's some grant funding right now for infrastructure projects down there, but there's going to be more, and there's going to be more things that we need. But again, this all sort of takes long-term sort of investment planning and expertise in terms of the engineering, this preliminary studies that need to happen beforehand. So I think if we can have this take place with the right stakeholders, that would help move faster. And I mean, the composition that I imagine for that subcommittee would be, representatives from the commercial fishermen, the lobstermen, having the harbor master there, representatives from engineering and finance, sort of somebody who has, and it can be, I mean, there's no set way as to how this is made up. This is sort of my thought process on the expertise that you might want there. But if there's someone who has a background in capital planning, I think that would be really helpful to have, so that we can have that sort of begin to move forward, since it is the top priority, and while we continue to talk out the rest of the prioritization.
The subcommittee with the fishermen representation, the priority has already been identified. So just say one thing like the Pier. Okay, how do we fund the Pier project? I don't have any expertise in writing grants. I don't think many of the other fishermen do either.
Right.
Does the town have the resources to write grants and request funding from different sources? I would think that would be a priority to get the money in place before we can do anything. I know that we have Carlos Pena, on the books, and so he knows more about what things are going to cost. But is he the guy to write the grant, or is he the guy to draw up the plan? So my point is that, does the town have resources to write grants?
Right. Yes. So the general answer is yes. I do think that for this sort of undertaking, we may need additional bandwidth, but whether that's, a planning consultant or, an engineering consultant, whatever that is, but it would be the town. Typically, I would say that also most grant programs that we're going to, it does need to be the municipal lead that is making that application. But yes, it would. My thought process here was not so much that you would rely on the town resources and partnership and that sort of undertaking, but we would need your expertise to really help shape this conversation and do that prioritization, because at the end of the day, you're the expert on that sort of those issues.
Do we have to go through the select board and the town manager before we can request a grant application? I mean,
Yes. Yes.
And so what's the procedure in that regard? So
In terms of
well, we already know that we need a pier. We already know we need funding. So now what do we do to get that funding, who do we talk to first? Do we have meetings, more meetings, and then discuss ways of writing grants, or do we?
Well, I guess I think I'm misunderstanding your question. Do you have already a grant specifically that you know of, or do you mean how would we do this in the future, or how would we identify the grant?
I don't have any ideas of grants.
Okay, so what my suggestion would be, if the committee is in agreement with starting this, we would put together sort of a scope. We would then have, it would be that committee who, I mean, if it doesn't have to be you particularly who, you know, sources the grant and makes the application, but we would have whomever staff member assigned to that would do that work and that undertaking and working with the committee. And it would go back to town manager, potentially for the select board. They don't review every grant application. It sort of depends on what it is. But in the meantime, I think if we do want to move in that direction, I could assist you in provide, like typing up a charge, and you would go to the select board, have the conversation. We want to establish this subcommittee, and then you would get to work.
Okay.
That's how it was done with the master plan, in my experience, watching how they were breaking out into those working groups.
My concern is simply that in order to get funding, we're looking for a lot of money, and we should have expert advice in regards to writing up a grant application and where to look for grants, you know, where to look for the money. I think we need some resources that have a lot of experience in that regard.
I agree.
Does the town have a grant writer?
No.
No.
But they generally do contract with people for specific projects. Such as,
Outside of us.
right.
At times, yes. The
Right.
grants can either be written in-house with staff. It's typically sort of a collaborative effort either between myself, procurement department, and engineering.
Mhm.
Or there are times that we have a consultant that writes the grant on behalf of the town. Again, it depends on the grant and our bandwidth and resources.
So who does the research for what grants are available?
It's a joint effort.
Okay. How can we find out where to go? I mean, I'd be willing to help a little.
Right.
I'm not a grant writer, but who can help us know how to begin unless we have to go hire somebody?
Right. Well, I would say also in the implementation chapter of the harbor plan, there are recommendations so there's some recommendations in there. And there's also, I mean, we can begin to look. It's just, we need to know like the project that we'd be
Right.
going for, and then but that can be done with staff.
I think that a lot of it would fall under the Seaport Economic Development Council grants. And when I went to their information meeting a year ago, I guess, November, December, something last year, they also talked about complementary grants that would go along with some of the Seaport Economic Development Council grants. So some of them were from coastal zone management. Some of them were specific to dredging. Some of them were, I remember the guy from the Mass Lobstermen's Association, but it wasn't Adam Donovan, was there, Matt. I'll have to find my notes and figure out exactly what that was. But
Fisherman from town?
it was a pretty,
fisherman from Cohasset?
what's that?
Was it a fisherman from Cohasset?
No, not from Cohasset. Somewhere like in maybe New Bedford.
Okay.
And we run into him somewhere else too. But anyway, so there's, I think what they're wanting us to do is to coordinate the grants through our town manager so that we don't have different parts of the town applying and competing for each other.
Right.
So we definitely want to think about it that way, but it was pretty informative to go to the meeting, and they did share a number of the other grants that are available through the state of Massachusetts.
Can I suggest we back up just for one sec and consider the structure that a Laura was suggesting about, and I can imagine if I'm sitting in Matt's shoes or anybody's shoes here, that, we don't want another like year and a half of committee meetings to be able to start looking to get the project started. But do you think, Laura, that if the group that you itemized as a subcommittee that was made up of a lot of experts in the field would bring more clout to an application to this town so that it would be readily accepted by them, kind of give them that imprimatur of professionalism to be asking those things? I just don't want to leave tonight with not having like a plan in place to begin, addressing that in the commercial fleets wants in a more substantive way.
Yeah, I do. I just think that one, as I mentioned, there's too many priorities right now and too many different tasks and things to concentrate at once. If it was the group of us, how often would we have to meet to get these things all to happen? And again, also just in terms of like, I don't have the resources and the expertise to be that person. I can do sort of some staff assistance in that aspect, but there's a lot of, things that I don't have the engineering background that you would need. I don't have, so it's things like that. But I do think that this would be helpful in streamlining that, getting those initiatives running.
Can I ask a question about your slides about the future areas? So how might those be? How might those be incorporated into the two things, the harbor infrastructure and the harbor governance, after the initial things?
So the way I sort of imagine this is, the three sort of steps that I gave were like immediate next steps. That's what we would do right now in the next few months. I think harbor governance then starts to think about more of those future aspects, whereas the infrastructure piece and the capital planning for the, that infrastructure, that's really their focus. But all of the other future items sort of live under harbor governance, is in how I was imagining it. So I think there's a lot, and that I don't know exactly how those should be structured or carried out in the future, but I think that there's more conversations to be had. I think all of you, the comments that I got back from everybody, is really honestly fascinating to see the way that people organize and prioritize. And I think, like Susan, you're the chart. I'm a huge fan of charts. You should see what she gave me. I can circulate it. But I just think you all have brilliant ideas, and it's just we need to sort of separate and begin to have these conversations taking place in separate tracks, because right now they're sort of almost competing with each other. It's like we don't have all the time needed and the attention to do this all at once. So that's why I'm thinking we separate it out. We get the people and the expertise we need to really get this stuff moving on the infrastructure piece, and then all the rest of it will sort of come into place. But right now, we need to do something to start to get our arms around it.
Oh,
Do you think that we should pick one thing? Like, for example, Matt's talking about the pier. Should we focus just on the pier, or are there like two huge things that are most important? But is it better just focus on one thing and get it done, or should we do a couple? What do you think?
I think it depends on.
My understanding all along was, we worked long and hard and got the document in place and voted on it and everything else. And then my understanding was that the Seaport Council was waiting for our application to apply for funding for some of these projects. So I just think that's what we should be focusing on now, is trying to secure funding for whatever project we want to do. I think we've prioritized some of them, and we could bundle them together, I would think. But inside the bundle, there should be a priority. So if you just go to the Seaport District and apply for a pier, then the other thing's going to be on the back burner. But if you apply, for the pier and a few other things, and and package it together, seems to me it would be a little bit more productive.
Matt, I don't have my notes in front of me, but what I do remember is that there were two and maybe Lauren, you can clarify. there were two kinds of grants that they had. One was your grant in which you would hire the engineers to make the plan. And the other kind of grant was once you had the plan and it was entirely ready to put that shovel in the earth, entirely ready, like all the approvals were done. At that was, you would have a different grant for that building part of it. That's what I remember from that meeting too.
So we're kind of waiting for Carlos to come up with a plan for the pier. You know, he has money to design a pier and to get permits for the pier. Now, are we going to have to wait for him to get that done before we apply for money to get the pier actually built?
I'm not
I suppose-
entirely certain.
Pardon me?
I'm not entirely certain of the answer to that question.
Okay.
It all depends what the grant requirements are. But I do think that
I'm sorry. Are there professional grant writers that we could hire?
There are, yes.
Would the town be, what do you think are odds of convincing the select board to throw money our way for that?
I don't know if I can speak to that.
Have you had experience in the past with organizations in the town hiring professional grant writers?
So it's never been specifically like a standalone grant writer. I mean, there's been times where, for example, like a engineering consultant has prepared and then done the engineering work that goes along with it. So it can sort of be sometimes a partnership like that. But I mean, I also haven't been here that long, but in my year and a half here, we haven't had a dedicated, you will write all the grants in town. We don't have that.
Maybe I can just step in here to help clarify. I've been trying to stay quiet because I'd like to have everybody else participate. And I've shuffled this deck, this 52-card deck, several times since July. But in terms of we have two grants. One grant is for the Parker Avenue boat ramp, and the other grant is for Government Island Pier. Both of those grants are for the engineering. Both of those will require another grant for funding. Carlos has written the grants that have been approved and received by the town, and he is perfectly capable of writing the grant for the funding to build the pier.
Oh, great.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Okay, I will now go on mute again, and
That was great, Tim.
There you go.
I know Tom Norton made a very wise comment in one of our meetings saying, let's get the low-hanging fruit, first. And there's nothing like a success to make you motivated to keep moving. So why not just put a lot of focus in on moving that project forward, as Tim and Matt and others have already done, and try to get that moving as far as we can in the first step.
Are we, just to be clear, are we talking about building a new pier or expanding the one that is there, or adding dock space so that we can accommodate more lobster boats, or, and how does that relate to the issues of the hauling lift and
So I think I have an answer for that, Susan. We had a meeting with Carlos a week or so ago, a couple weeks ago, and he came up with a simple plan. He wanted just to widen the Government Island as it exists and go out the length of where the floats are now. Go to that point. We'd have to cut off about 8 feet of floats on the south side of Government Island, and have the pier go out there and have 2 hydraulic lifts one on either corner of that pier. He suggested that we make it 24 feet wide. All the fishermen concurred that wasn't going to be wide enough because if there's a bait truck or a fuel truck on that pier, take it up one side, it'd be pretty narrow for another guy to back a trailer down, accurately to load or unload his gear or whatever. So we've been suggesting that he make it out to 30 feet wide. And it's all basically wasted space on that side of Government Island Pier anyway. So another 30 feet over wouldn't really affect much of anything. So that's where we were in the process. Did Carlos agree with us? Not necessarily, but he took it under advisement. And but I think the fishermen know, you got a big, box truck in there, this 18-foot box truck in there, or a fuel oil truck in there. It's only 24 feet wide. It's going to be tough to have a second view, backing down a trailer. So, and you do it once, do it right. That's my mantra.
Yeah, so I'd actually be interested in hearing more of the details about that whole plan, but this is probably not the time or place to do that. So I guess the question is, what is the right time and place to do that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. We haven't had any scheduled meetings with Carlos. When we left that meeting, I've been adamant since day one that the fishermen should be involved in the design because they know what works and what doesn't work. And Carlos is the engineer. He should listen to the users, the stakeholders, I guess you call it, and adapt his plan to their uses. I would think. But, he asked for volunteers to form a subcommittee, and 3 or 4 guys volunteered. I asked the guys the other day if any of them had heard from Carlos, and nobody had heard from Carlos. So that's where it stands now. I don't know much more than that, Susan. That's about it.
But that's kind of like the whole point of structuring our next steps. Like, how do we go about doing that? Is that a subcommittee that we need to add to Lauren's list, or how should we make sure that that's, how should we go with that so we don't end up missing something important that should be on there? And
Let me, if I could, I hate to unmute myself again and say anything, but just to clarify where we are. Since July, and we've had, and I'll say this kind of rhetorically, struggle to figure out where we go from here in terms of implementation. The commercial fishermen formed a small working group themselves to work with Carlos and the town on the design and implementation of the Government Island improvements. They asked me to help with the liaison with Chris Sr., and I have been working with Chris and trying to get Chris to approve the next session with the fishermen and Carlos. As of yesterday, at my last meeting yesterday with my last meeting with Chris Sr., he agreed he wants to have Leslie Ann McGee involved in that meeting. So I have today sent a request to Tracy in Chris's office to set up that. So as soon as that meeting is set up, it will be a Zoom meeting, and certainly anybody who would like to participate in that meeting will be welcome. But that will be the next meeting for the fishermen to communicate with Carlos and see what progress he's made on the design for the plan. With that, I will mute myself again. Thank you.
Tim, do you mind imposing on you one more time to unmute yourself? Because I had a quick question that maybe you have an answer to. It seems like, so we have Carlos we have this grant and for the engineering. Is the next step just funding? The question of what the grant would be, is it to secure the full funding of the actual building of it? Is that what's left beyond the engineering?
No, there's quite a bit of engineering and design that still has to happen before we apply for any grant from Seaport.
Okay.
In addition to that, the Seaport does not pay 100%. So
Okay.
we will have to go to capital budget
Mhm.
for the town portion of it. We'll also investigate, we should investigate, and I say we, this is at this point, it's not the Harbor Committee, this is the commercial fishermen that are doing this. Have to see whether there are other funds available for that, because it will be significant without any question, in the millions of dollars.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So I guess one of my more general questions about it would be, how many of the goals get checked off in that one process? So that's my general question. I would have specific questions about that because I've read the stuff carefully. I want to make sure that we do the right thing for you guys. And it would kind of be a bummer to plan one thing and have forgotten about another thing.
You're not asking me to answer that, are you? No. Okay.
I think she's asking Matt, isn't she, Matt?
No. I'm trying to hold off on detailed questions for the right time, and it's obviously not now. But I just, I kind of want to know what's being planned down there. That seems like a really big deal. And of all the time that we've spent talking about things, I just think off my top of my head, I have 3 questions I want to make sure, get covered in that plan. So whenever the time is, do it then.
I think we're getting off track here. We've got to figure out where we're going, not only on this, but everything else with the harbor plan. And this is what we've been struggling with. I've been struggling with, frankly, since July. So I think, we can have these kind of meetings where we talk on
Nothing done.
different specific issues. But until we actually agree we're going to get together in small groups to get something done, we're going to be doing this when the virus is mystically disappeared, is magically gone by next Easter.
Yeah, really. Well, I mean, that's why I suggested that we go back to the original plan that Lauren has put forward to us and decide if we want to adopt that breakdown of the 2 subcommittees. And that makes sense to me. I don't know if anybody wants to entertain motions on it.
I didn't hear that, but go ahead. If that's what you want to do, go for it.
No, my point being is that, Laura put a lot of time into taking, all our priorities. She put together a great little PowerPoint. It talked about a structure to go forward. Do we want to adopt that or don't we? I mean, that's, I thought, was supposed to be the point of us meeting this evening.
Guys, this is Tom. I think we can do both. I think just thinking about this, I completely agree that what Lauren has proposed has validity long-term, but short-term, there wouldn't be any harm for us with the 7 people on this call tonight to start get rolling on this project, start to get the fishermen together, look and see where Carlos is at. How much money do we have? What kind of budget does Carlos need to actually put forth a plan that we could come together, meet all the needs of the fishermen, as well as what, like you were saying, Susan, there's priorities that maybe the Harbor Committee would like involved in, and then get that process going, and in the same time work on trying to form these subcommittees. But I think if we just go into subcommittee mode tonight, then we're going to spend the next month trying to find the committee members and then start this whole thing over. So I think we could do it both. I would probably move to try to approve what Lauren had said or created, but then also let's come up, and I don't know public meetings, I don't know how this stuff works, but let's get rolling with Carlos and the fishermen and talking about a budget, and let's try to get the next step, which would be an engineering drawing, and then say we're going to need this much money, and then go to the town and say there's a Seaport grant for this, in the town we're going to need this. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think?
It sounds to me like the fishermen have it kind of under control. It sounds like they're going in one direction, and I don't understand where we would come in to help them. They sound like they're pretty organized in their site. They're pretty organized. So I'm wondering, with the other things that we've said, it doesn't seem like this is our major thing. I know we're concerned about the fishermen, but it sounds like they've got, what more can we do to help them? They've got their grant writer, they've got their engineer. Is there something, are there other groups that we should start looking at? Or am I wrong in that, Matthew?
I think you're a little bit wrong on that. We're not organized by any stretch, for one thing. But we
Where
have
do you
our
need our help?
we certainly have our needs, and and if this goes on forever, we'll have a beautiful pier and there won't be any fishermen left, because
Right.
it's getting to that point, and we need to act somehow. I don't know, I'm not an official in the town, but somehow the process needs to go forward. Whatever it takes to move it forward, we need to do. Guys are getting older, guys are getting out. I mean, and the piers are falling down, and it's.
So if that's a priority, how do we figure out how we can help, where we can help? Does anybody agree with it?
Lauren, I think Lauren had some good ideas, but the subcommittees have to meet, and you can't meet every day, you can't meet every week, you can't, so
No.
time goes on, and and everybody has their own opinions about things. But, this meeting tonight was to identify the priorities that we've all put forth,
Right.
and then pick away at them and figure out a way to get it done. So that's what I thought this meeting was about.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Me too.
Oh, me too.
So I'm uncomfortable voting on the two subcommittees that Lauren has proposed until we figure out what the role of the fishermen's subcommittee is, because I want to make sure that it covers wetlands issues, coastal resiliency, safety, harbor master dock, and whether we have dock level access. That's sort of a safety thing. I feel like as we, it's such a central point in the harbor, it's helpful to have a dock there. I also want to know whether it includes the project of dealing with the fill at the old salt house that runs into the fisherman's skiff area, and whether it covers a place for careening, and also it's an issue of aesthetics, however that pier is built. So that's where I feel like I would like that committee to have some input that's not just plain fishermen, but also has concerns about the other things too.
I think it's confusing structure.
Right.
I think it's confusing structure of organization of how to go forward to subject matter that those the groups will be looking at.
No, but that's what I'm confused about, is where that there's already a subcommittee meeting with Carlos. Where does that subcommittee?
No, it's a committee of fishermen.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with us, really. I mean, they're not appointed members of the harbor committee.
The Fishermen's Association had a meeting, and we decided that we were going to have a subcommittee within the Fishermen's Association to meet with Carlos and go over points of interest, points of in regards to the design and the engineering of the design, not the engineering, but the design of the pier. Now, all the other stuff that you're concerned about, Susan, is it's all part of the master plan. But right now, we're focused on one thing, and yes, we're very concerned about the environment. We're very concerned about the mess over at the salt house. We're very concerned about all of it, and but those guys aren't part of the process. So all they're concerned about is what they need. I don't know what else I can say. I think we addressed all the other issues about resiliency and environmental and all that stuff in the master plan, and we certainly will. That certainly will be part of the project, I would think.
So you think that we at least should get involved with this, with the fishermen meeting and see where we can help them?
Yeah, I feel uninformed. I mean, this is the first I've heard about the fact that Carlos is engaged to do this,
Right.
and that you guys all have a plan. And I was like, oh, I mean, so Matt, I want fishermen to design it. I want you guys to get what you need. I don't think that I don't think I'm going to be able to, you know, give good advice as to what the docking situation should be. But I do feel like the whole point of having a harbor committee is so that we could deal with the things that are integrated needs. So if there's changing harbor traffic that happens as a result of a pier extension, like all these things that affect more than one entity, I thought are the domain of the harbor committee. And I would think that that is why the harbor committee should continue to exist, so that we integrate things that are, you know, that integrate by naturally. Like, things don't operate in a silo in a harbor. There's overlapping needs, there's overlapping recreation, and there's overlapping currents and overlapping, you know, whatever you dump in on one end is going to float around. So that would be where I would say there's a need for the harbor committee to continue, is when one person's plan or one person's project impacts the other entities in the harbor.
But you're getting off track, Susan. You're getting off track, Susan. We're here. I'm almost quite positive we're here tonight to identify the priorities that we have and move forward on those priorities. Everything else is, I know everything's all interconnected, but we have to move and forward.
Can I ask a clarifying question? If in fact we were applying for a grant, there was a document presented by the engineer, that would be something that would that be brought back to the full harbor committee to say that this is good, this is bad, this is what we're proposing? I mean, I understand Susan's concern, but I think we're getting way down the rabbit hole of input on a project, and we're trying to figure out structure of how to do an implementation. And I think everyone's frustrated because we've all put, you know, we're kind of moving in circles here again. Whereas I thought we decided we're going to try to prioritize certain things and then figure out how to pick them off, how to accomplish them, how to have an success. And we're getting into the minutia, the important minutia, but the granular nature of the decisions that we'll maybe be making or advising on in the future, as opposed to deciding that we're going to pick the harbor up here as our first thing, and we're going to work in any way we can help the harbor committee, not just the fishermen, but have the harbor committee go forward and get this grant to finish the project. And am I making any sense here? Because I feel like we're, you know, this is the Groundhog Day.
That sounds good to me. I liked it. Yeah, I mean, I think should, as much as we want to prioritize and figure out all these things we want to do, we know the fishermen need help, and let's make it at the pier.
I think we should focus. We should focus on, you know, certain things and on the priorities that we've identified, and focus on that.
And that doesn't mean that we can't ask questions and have different
Absolutely.
opinions and change
Susan,
whatever proposal comes forward.
right. Susan, we had a meeting, and the fishermen had a meeting. It didn't, you know, we did invite outside people. I mean, it was a fishermen's meeting, and I mean, you could have been there, but you know, if you heard about it, we wouldn't have excluded you. And but it was just a very informal outside. We're on the pier just talking. You know, it wasn't anything specific. But you know, everybody's somewhat frustrated, and so we're just trying to get something done, and we don't know how to begin the process. We've identified what we need. The town is vowed to support us in the needs that we need to get. And so let's figure it out. Let's focus on one thing at a time. So,
Lauren, maybe defer to you. Could you help us with some clarity on this? Maybe based on your expertise, although You're probably half our age or less.
Oh, Lauren.
Who's the old man here, Tom?
Probably a lot more than that on some of us, but help us,
Easy, Tom.
clarity on this.
So, I mean, I think this is like where it gets difficult. And this is, I think my intention in trying to suggest this breakdown wasn't just to create more committees, but to create more sizable ways to chunk off the priorities. Because other than the standalone, very clear infrastructure, commercial fisher piece of it, I couldn't necessarily say that there was one particular topic that was the next easily picked out. So that's why I'm thinking that, in the meantime, while we need to figure out prioritization still collectively, what goes on next, I think that's why I suggested separating it out so that they could start to, at least one of them isn't sort of holding back the other and distracting from time and attention and resources, if that makes sense.
Lauren, so you have had experience writing grants, but that's not your job. It's correct. I mean,
Right.
I'm sure your plate is full. Is there anybody at town hall that does have experience writing grants besides yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's typically, it's like the same 3 people in town hall. It's our procurement director, one of our engineers, and myself that typically share this.
So
Does Carlos do that?
sounds like he wrote the grant to get the funding for what he's
Right.
doing. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe we need to be communicating with the fishermen. We need to be together.
Right.
Right? 'Cause Matt knows what we need, but we don't know.
I just it's
Well,
got to go
isn't
up the ladder. I mean, you have to get someone to write a grant, and then it has to go up the ladder and then back down. And
Well, does it make sense for the Harbor Committee to petition Chris Senior to tell us if we can, have a commitment of resources from the town to either internally or externally get the grant written? I mean, that seems to be the next. Is that right, Laura? I mean, as far as a trajectory of next steps for this particular project?
Yes, I think that makes the most sense. I actually was going to suggest if it would be help from my end to sort of internally meet with Chris and whoever from our engineering department and see what we need to do.
that would make sense to me. It's got to go up the ladder at some point, so you might as well do it, right away. And see where
Does this have to be, and where it's a harbor issue, does this have to go through Laurie for as far as a harbor budget? Laurie, do you have any comment on that? Is that her? That's Laurie, right?
Lori is the call-in number.
Yeah.
She's muted, but she can talk to us if she'd like. I don't believe that it would necessarily have to go through our budget.
I'm just wondering, right?
Right.
And another issue is if you consider if the town has to put in their 25% or whatever it might be, it should be done before the next town meeting. So it's in the
Right.
the budget request for the next town meeting. So that's not very far away.
Matt, as I said before, I believe that Carlos has got as part of his contract that is being paid for by the current Seaport grant to write the grant for the work to be done.
Okay.
I believe that's included. Lauren, you can verify that, but I believe that's included. One of the things that I've been trying to get from Carlos is an estimate, the total estimate of the cost, so we can find out what the town's portion of that might be and get that submitted to the capital budget committee, which is the way it happens in Cohasset. You submit it. Lori would probably in her jurisdiction, she would submit it to the capital budget, or perhaps the harbor committee could do that. But one way or the other, the capital budget committee has to get that at some point early enough so that if it has to go to town meeting, it goes to town meeting in the spring.
Okay, so we seem to have a road, some steps.
Well, there are lots of steps, and the steps have been going on regularly. They continue on. The fishermen are working on it. Carlos is working on it. The town is aware of it. Michelle has been actively involved in that without any question. So it is moving along. The meeting that Matt was mentioned that the fishermen had included Lori, included Michelle, it included Joan Machino. I forget who else other than the fishermen were there, but there were quite a few people that were there.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to know that the harbor master was included in that too, because it's obviously an important pier for her as well.
Yeah, she's participated.
So is it our role as a harbor committee then, like you were talking about, Lauren, to, I want to say, put pressure on the select board or Christine or whoever, or to go back to them and communicate, this is our priority. What exactly can you do to push this forward? Is that what we're supposed to be? Because I know we're advisory.
Right.
So-
I mean, I think that's an appropriate, chain of command sort of to go back to, because I mean, you are advisory to the select board. You can return to the select board, and if there's resources that you've identified or areas that you need support in, that would be the correct path.
And isn't there, didn't the select persons, Tim, I remember you sending something out that at some point they wanted a briefing from the harbor committee of where we were at, and perhaps that would be the one of an effective manner to tell them that this is a priority that we would like to support and would like them to support. So I don't know if that's been marked up for a date. I know they've been pretty busy.
I haven't seen a date, Lisa, but Diane Kennedy is working with Chris. They both want to have the harbor committee on an agenda before the end of the year. They are well aware that this is a #1 priority.
Sure.
I have, as I mentioned, I've got a weekly meeting with Senior, not just for this issue, but for many other issues. And he is well aware that this is a #1 priority. Diane Kennedy is well aware that this is #1 priority. And Jack Creighton, who is the liaison to the select board, to the harbor committee, is well aware of it. So that everybody is aware that this is #1 priority.
And we've been meeting how many months to to get to the same conclusion?
Can I ask a question to Tim?
Sure.
Tim, does Carlos have a timeline that he has to adhere to in regards to this? I mean,
I can't answer that, Matt. I have not talked to Carlos recently. I do know I was copied on essentially minutes of a meeting that Carlos had with CZM. I believe it was last week. So I know he is working on it, but Carlos asked me to get permission from Chris Senior to have the next meeting with the commercial fishermen. And I have now done that. That's what I went through before. So at that next meeting, we'll get additional information from Carlos, timeline, budgets, all the questions that have come up today. Plus, there is one group of the fishermen that would like to have a conveyor.
that's definitely still on the agenda for sure.
Yeah, and there are people that think that's inappropriate and people that think that's appropriate. So that still has to be resolved. So that's just one more item to consider.
The person, whoever says it's inappropriate, are they part of this process?
Have they what?
Are they part of the process? Are they part of the process, or is it just a citizen
Carlos,
at large that doesn't want a conveyor? I mean,
Carlos is one of them that thinks it's inappropriate, but I really do think the fisherman should ask him why he thinks it's inappropriate and have him explain it, because he's done quite a bit of research on it as well. So this is not the forum to decide whether we're going to have a conveyor or not, but I'm pushing hard to get that next meeting so that we don't get so far along in the design process that we can't make any changes to it.
So I have a question, and maybe I need to form this as a motion, but I feel like I'm missing. I feel like I go to all these meetings. I don't think I've missed any meetings, but I feel like I'm I'm way behind. I feel like I haven't done my homework, or I haven't been caught up on things, or I don't know what's going on. So I would like it if, when there's things that have happened, successes mostly, right, that it's shared with us. It's part of the agenda of updates, so that maybe we include an update for our regular meetings on the agenda, and we include updates from fishermen all meeting together and figuring some things out that we should all know and hear about. Or, you know, we've met with the master plan committee and we have some things to share with everybody. Because I feel like these things come up kind of in conversation in not in an ordered way. And it makes me feel like, wait, what did I miss? How did I miss this? I feel like I've been diligent. I've been trying to respond when I get an email about harbor committees. I go to all the meetings, and yet I'm still like, what's going on? So would that be a structural thing that we could add to our future meetings, like updates? There's minutes, you know, there's you know, the regular things. And then after the minutes, we get updates. So then I know what's going on, and then I'm not like, I'm feeling blindsided, so therefore I have all these questions, and then somebody tells me that I'm inappropriate and not focused enough. But I want to know stuff. I like to know. That's why I'm on this thing, and I'm not on it for any other reason, really, other than to, you know, make sure that we're all communicating.
Makes sense to me. I mean, I think this is sharing of information. That'd be great.
I think it's a good idea. I feel lost too. I thought it was because I was new to the committee, so.
Okay. I mean, how do we?
All right, so what's the next step?
So do I have to make a motion that updates from various subcommittees are included in future harbor committee agendas? Or Lauren, is it better to just get this information out by email? Is that, I don't know what's efficient. Like, I don't want to have people bored with meetings. I mean, everyone goes to plenty of meetings, some of them more than others. Hi, Lauren. And I don't want to make meetings longer or more boring. So if it's better to do it by email, so be it. I'm feeling lost, and now we know what we're not. So.
My reaction to that is I think it is better to do it at the meetings. I think when we, you know, sort of start sharing updates and information over email, we start to get into potential room for deliberation, and then you're violating open meeting law. So I would suggest that the best way to move forward, as you were just making a motion, is just to have sort of standing agenda item for harbor updates on harbor committee agendas moving forward. Okay. And it's easy enough to do. So we do that at planning board. It's like a standing item.
Okay, I hereby propose a motion to have updates be a standing part of harbor committee agenda.
Second.
And I just feel like we've just recreated the wheel. It's like the information was out there and I'm a little frustrated.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Bob.
I know, I'm talking to myself, I think. I just kind of feel like we're asking all these questions and the answers were there. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I think you're saying it pretty clearly. So where do we go from here? Because it's 6:19 and we want to make this productive.
Do we have to vote on that plan that Lauren did so beautifully?
Only if you agree with moving in that direction. If you would like, I will, you know, I'll make sure that that's your standing agenda item as you just voted. I will internally connect with engineering and procurement and Chris Senior to find out what needs to happen for the pier And then if you want to move forward at breaking into subcommittees like that, then I can help prepare committee charges so that we can actually, I mean, this would just be your vote to establish it, and then you'd vote again on the charge once we were ready for that. It wouldn't really establish anything tonight. You still would have to go through that process, but at least we agree that we'd be moving in that direction.
My vote is moving forward on that, but.
Yep.
So do you want me to make a motion? Motion to approve the two subcommittees that Lauren's proposed?
I second.
Any nays?
Do we need any discussion? I mean, someone has to be sharing this. Is it?
God bless you all. Go for it.
Are you a nay?
No.
Okay.
Well,
I'm all for anything that's going to move it forward. Go for it. And thank you, Lauren, for pulling that together. If you can create something out of tonight that is meaningful, God bless you too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren, for doing all that work. I really appreciate it. So,
So I'm happy that you found it somewhat helpful, because was
Yeah.
just really my intent.
yeah.
Do we want to just
It
talk
would be-
real fast about frequency of meetings, or is that,
That would be helpful, I think.
yeah, I think so, to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Monthly? Is it too much, too little?
Well, which meeting are you referring to? The Harbor Committee or the subcommittees that are going to get the work done?
To be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
I think the discussion in the proposal that Lauren put out was talking about when the Harbor Committee would meet. And then I would imagine whoever is on the other subcommittees will internally decide, especially with other operatives from the town, what the schedule would be for that. So I think the question is the monthly or quarterly or daily meetings of the Harbor Committee.
The month?
Yeah, I think monthly probably makes sense.
Monthly makes sense.
We can get the fisherman stuff moving along, maybe?
When's the next town meeting? Does that happen?
Do we have one in November?
I don't, last I heard, we were not having a special town meeting, so it'll be the next annual.
And when's that,
It's typically late April.
no.
So if somebody needs money, we have to wait for that, right? But is there a certain time you have? Okay, that's another issue. Never mind.
What I will do also for our next meeting is prepare sort of the general boilerplate of
Yeah.
capital budget requests to town meeting.
Okay,
That would be great.
that would be
I think
great.
it's a reasonable point though, Barbara, that, you know, we
Right.
should keep rolling along in terms of how much money do we think we're going to need? I mean, Matt, do you have is there any of their plans for Carlos and this fisherman to get together or?
Well, like,
Go ahead.
Tim just said that he has to go to, we have to go to Christina apparently in order to have a meeting with Carlos. So that's in the process now, and
Okay, I'm sorry.
somewhere down the line, we'll have a meeting with Carlos and discuss his progress and see if he has come up with any kind of numbers for us. I mean, they must know, square footage costs, I would think, but,
Yeah.
uh,
Okay. Yeah, I missed that. I apologize. My bad.
yeah.
No.
Speaking of which, did Carlos ever come back with the amended projection of the cost for the pier? I mean, I'm sorry, yeah, for the launch, the end of Parkinson Ave?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean,
No.
I went to.
I mean, at the last Harbor Committee meeting we had at the Sailing Club, there was a discussion between Laurie and everybody and Carlos about, coming back with a different structure and a different cost. And I didn't know if that ever came to pass or if it was ever delivered.
This for the boat ramp you're talking?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was having a mind melt there.
Well, we 3 years ago, and this is my memory, and I might be wrong, but 3 years ago, we had a meeting down at the park around the boat ramp with Laurie and Carlos and a bunch of people, and I was under the understanding that there was already a budget for that for the boat ramp of somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000, but Tell me that I'm wrong. And but that was 3 years ago. And
No, I think there was some different structure that they wanted to come and do. Laura, do you remember this?
well, they want to widen it, and but there was going to be a deal with the abutter to make it a little bit wider, so there could be 2 trailers going down. So I don't know if that ever got resolved.
There
Kim,
was-
do you remember this? There was some question about it changing the design because the design he came up with was too expensive. Do you remember?
The boat ramp?
Yeah.
There are two designs for consideration. One is to do it wet, and the other is to do it with a cofferdam.
Mm-hmm.
And I've not seen the estimates on both of those. I'm not sure it's gone out to bid yet on those.
That's to build it, Tim. Though that's not the design itself. Is
think-
there one design?
I think the design has been complete, Matt.
Oh, okay.
Now, the reason I ask is that, I was interested in how quickly he got back with the second estimate, since if we're looking for an estimate for the other project, what is the length of time that someone comes back on an estimate on it? But we can table that. I was just wondering about that because it's been pending for a long time.
Hey, Matt, do you think Carlos does Zoom?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, it does.
I think everybody does Zoom now.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Everyone does Zoom.
everyone
I know,
does.
well, I know. Because it would really help if
All right.
we get him on
Does anybody
Zoom.
have anything else to discuss? We need to let Lauren get hard to work to get this all done by tomorrow morning.
I
Any
proposed a
other,
motion and it
Any
was
other
seconded.
comments, thoughts, input?
Yeah, I proposed a motion and it was seconded. So can we vote on that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, unanimous. Go for it, Lauren. Anything else? With that, thank you all for being here. Appreciate it very much, and see you on the next one.
Hold on. No, wait a second. I'm sorry. I had proposed a very minuscule little motion about adding updates to our agenda. And then there's another motion on the table, I think, that involves approving Lauren's 2 committees. And I don't want that to be confused in the public record. Which one did we just vote on?
Lauren's proposal. What do you want is updates from what?
That an update is included in the standing agenda for the Harbor Committee. So we do the meeting, the minutes, and then we have an update from anybody who's got news to share with us from subcommittees, whatever.
Yeah, I thought we kind of pretty much informally agreed to that, and I think Lauren said that would be part of the agenda
I
that she
think
put together for the meetings.
that would be,
I don't know that we gave people a chance to say nay.
since we have no subcommittee at this point, that will come with I'm sure Lauren will write that in. That'll be reporting to the Harbor Committee with updates, regular updates. Anything else? Is that okay with you, Susan? Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah, yes, I just nodded, but I guess you can't hear that on the public record. Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Anything else? And this meeting, yes, Lauren?
I'm sorry, we said that we would meet monthly, but do we want to pick a next meeting date? If we met the first Thursday in December, it would be December 3rd. I don't know if people want to set a date right now, or I can.
I'm fine with it.
Why don't we shoot